am Jeff Martin, and I am the Director of Communications for the American Anthropological Association. I am a white male with graying brown hair, black rimmed glasses, and I am reporting to you from the lovely confines of my kitchen, where just 5 minutes ago I spilled coffee all over my notes. Isn't it wonderful working from home? Welcome to Game-Changing Job Search Strategies as an Applied Anthropologist. It's a 4-part webinar series hosted by AAA and designed especially for those of you whose jobs or job opportunities have been disrupted by COVID-19. And I know there are a lot of people out there that were affected by this. The webinar series is going to run through the month of July. And it's going to be on Thursdays, each consecutive Thursday. It started last week when we did Showcase Your Unique Value and we went over elevator pitches. It continues today with 5 secrets for building networks that lead to jobs. It will then continue next Thursday, July 23rd, with This Is Not Your Parents' Resume, New Ways to Tell Your Story. And it will conclude on Thursday, July 30th, with part 4, Facing the Interview Squad, Strategies That Impress. Again, it's going to be held each Thursday and at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. For more information on our whole webinar series and what's taking place, I invite you to go to the actual AAA website and the webinar page. We're going to post that in the chat room right now, that link. That page will give you all the information you need to know. Back to this webinar though. To make this accessible for everyone, we're providing closed captioning. So if you would, for those of you unfamiliar with the whole Zoom process, if you move your cursor down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see several icons appear. One of those icons will be closed captioning. So if you click on that, you will see the icon, click on it, and closed captioning will appear. I'm going to ask all of the presenters to, again, remember to please introduce yourself before you start. And the presenters will also be going over each of their slides, explaining what's on each and every slide for that. Again, going back to the chat room itself, we will have, again, there's an icon at the bottom of your screen that says chat room. And if you would, please post your questions there. This is where we're going to have our conversations, both with presenters and the attendees who are with us today. If you have a question, put the word question first and then a break after that, and then say your question. This way, when we're going through, we can go through the conversations and pick out the questions themselves more specifically. Again, I also want to point out that this chat room is for all of us. And I like how in previous webinars, someone asked a question and sometimes a presenter would answer right away, but also other attendees, I invite you, other attendees said, here's a resource that I found to be helpful, or I had the same problem and this is what I did and it worked. So it serves as a community chat room and question and answer. We will be getting to those questions later on in the presentation. We also will be posting a poll right now for you to fill out. Again, don't overanalyze this. It should be pretty simple and easy. It's only a few questions, and it's just for us to ascertain who is on this webinar and what specifically you're looking for. It will help us a great deal. Lastly, we're also going to be posting on the AAA website, on the chat room, the resources that we're going to have and all the information that you'll need. The Q&A, and the slideshow and the presentation will all be posted on our website after this is done. There'll also be a recording available to everyone after this is done. So again, go to the chat room and you'll see our link to the AAA website and specifically the webinar page. Again, that'll be your best resource for that. Without any further ado, let me introduce Elizabeth Briody.
Hey everyone, I am Elizabeth Briody, and I am a white woman with short hair and glasses, and today I have on a, well, I guess it's a beige and blue top, and I am located in my alcove, which is a little space in my house with a window. Next slide. I think if you joined early, you would have seen this outline, but let me just briefly go over what we will be covering today. First, I will start out and talk about creating and extending your professional network. And next, we will have a discussion of exploratory networking and what happens when you start to do that. The third talk will be on networking as daily praxis, the fourth on the value of connections, and the last one will focus on LinkedIn. At any time while the presenters are talking, you may use the chat, as Jeff indicated, and then after the presenters have finished, we will have a general Q&A so that anyone can ask any or all of the presenters questions that they're interested in. And then finally, we'll just summarize. May I have the next slide, please? So I am Elizabeth Briody. I have my own consulting practice, which is called Cultural Keys. And I am also currently serving as secretary of the American Anthropological Association. Next slide. We get some super advice from our sister discipline of sociology. Mark Granovetter published a wonderful article in the American Journal of Sociology in 1973, which was called The Strength of Weak Ties. I encourage you all to read it if you are not familiar with it. For the purpose of securing a job, a consulting gig, a contract, or even an internship, we need to pay attention to weak ties. So what are weak ties? In weak ties, the personal or professional relationship that you have with someone is casual. The contact is intermittent at best. You can bridge to different networks by tapping into weak ties, whether they are your own weak ties or the weak ties of somebody that you know. So connecting our first webinar, which was on the elevator pitch, with Granovetter's work, we can learn something critically important. Make sure that your strong and your weak ties know two things. First, the key points of your elevator pitch at a very general level, and two, that you're looking for work. And then you can use your weak ties or links from your strong ties for informational interviews, which we will talk about in just a minute. We have the next slide, please. Here are three examples from my own consulting work. The first two examples worked out beautifully. In the first case, my friend Anne, with whom I had a strong tie, knew that I was looking for some consulting work, and she connected me to one of her weak ties, a woman named Chloe. And I ended up doing a big project for Chloe and her organization. Then in the second case, another person that I used to work with when I was at General Motors, named Ellie, was someone that I had a casual relationship with, and thus a weak tie. She knew about the work that I did, and she connected me with this guy, Bob, who was one of her weak ties. In the third example, that one didn't work out so well. Inga, with whom I had a strong tie, connected me to Jay, with whom she had a weak tie, and then Jay connected to Sam, with whom he also had a weak tie. So if you think about it, the relationship from me to Sam was pretty distant, pretty removed, too far removed. So as the header of this slide says, pay attention to the value of weak ties if they are not too far removed from you. Next slide, please. And now I want to add a new tool in your toolbox when you're searching for work. It's the informational interview. And this slide focuses on informational interview questions. So what you want to do is leverage your weak links or the weak links of someone you know for these kinds of informational interviews. There are two key purposes of an informational interview. Number one, you want to learn about the work of the weak link you are talking to. And number two, you want to get some career advice. I wrote down some possible questions under each of those purposes. So for learning about a person's work, you could ask, what type of work do you do? What's a typical or composite day like for you? What do you like best or least about the work you do? And what are the challenging aspects of your job? And then in terms of career advice, so you're asking this for yourself, what critical skills should I acquire to do your job? How does the hiring process work in your organization? And then very important, the last two questions, do not forget these. Are there other people that I might speak to? And may I follow up with you at a later date, say if I have some additional questions? The informational interview is usually short. I suggest about 15 minutes. Sometimes it might be 30 minutes. Next slide, please. So now let's say you are actually in the process of doing the informational interview. The key point I would like to make is in the header. Insert your elevator pitch into the informational interview at some point in that interview, not right up front. And you do it just once. Remember, you're there primarily to gather information. So act relaxed, intersperse your questions throughout the interview, turn that interview into something that feels more like a conversation. You'll feel better about it, and that person that you're interviewing will feel better about it. And then find a good way at some point in that discussion to connect one of the challenges that your interviewee mentioned to your elevator pitch. Take good notes, keep to the allotted time. If you ask for 15 minutes, take 15 minutes. Don't take 16 minutes. You can always just say, hey, we're running out of time. If the person invites you to continue talking, that's fine. But don't assume you can go over the 15 minutes or the 30 minutes, whatever you previously agreed to. And then write a thank you note. For goodness sakes, handwritten is best. My mother always said that, and I still believe it. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. You've got a job search or a search for consulting work or an internship. You've got to be systematic about this. Keep a log. The log will help motivate you, and it will also help you with recall. So I basically created an Excel spreadsheet here, and across the top, I've got contact and email, and that would be of the person that you are going to hopefully do an interview with. Then the date that you actually did that discussion, some background information on that person, any advice and referrals that that person gave you, and then what's the follow-up? What's your follow-up? In other words, what are you supposed to do, and have you done it yet? And you keep track of all of the informational interviews that you do, and you will do just fine, because eventually something is going to pop. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to our first, as I would say, storyteller, who will talk to you about her own experiences with networking. Ann Reed.
Thank you. And Elizabeth had some very sound advice, I'd say. I am Ann Reed, a woman with long red hair. I'm sitting in my home office with a painting of a truck on the wall. Next slide, please. Okay, so the title of my talk is Exploratory Networking and the Unexpected. I currently work as a customer researcher for Wellmark Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I also am doing organizational research as well, but my training is in cultural anthropology. Next slide, please. So it's important to recognize the law of diminishing returns of staying in academia. Unfortunately, in my case, I found that I was in somewhat of a holding pattern, and it was time for me to find professional opportunities elsewhere. So it's important to identify what feeds your soul. In my case, I wanted to have greater impact in the field of practice. Doing research that could be implemented in a way that is useful to the mission of an organization. I've also found that I've really enjoyed working as part of a research team, and that's something that you may not realize until you get out of academia, because I found that the opportunities for doing that were somewhat limited. It's important to brainstorm your skills and to have those in mind as you are doing informational interviews. And then also consider your economic and personal needs. Be realistic about your budget. And also, if you need to live in a certain geographic part of the US or part of the world, to consider, what are those limitations. Actually, in the post-COVID world that we're finding ourselves in, there are lots of opportunities to work remotely. Next slide, please. It's important to connect with supportive colleagues and to try and hustle for contacts. My approach to this was to talk to all of my colleagues from the various anthropology departments I'd worked in and get names of people working outside of academia to find out what they were up to. Start networking in anthropology, but don't end there. You need to kind of consider what your specific areas of interest are. If you're wanting to practice anthropology, how does that merge with, social scientist training if you're a cultural anthropologist? You should check out the NAPA mentoring program. That's, if you don't know, the National Association for the Practice of Anthropology. They have a really good resource where you can be matched one-on-one with a professional practicing anthropologist. So once again, you can find out different domains of the practice of anthropology and learn more about that area. Hone in on specific interests. In my case, I wanted to find out more about business anthropology, and I had learned that user experience research was kind of an up-and-coming specialization within this area, so I wanted to find out more about that. Identify those with whom you can do informational interviews. So that goes for people within the academic arena who have transitioned into the world of practice, as well as people in your own hometown or broader community who are finding themselves in those kinds of jobs that would appeal to you. Next slide, please. It's important to identify your long-term goals. So you have an idea of what you want to do immediately, but then also down the road. And in my case, I did an informational interview with a sociologist who started her own consulting firm. And I thought, oh, that's a really great idea, but I feel like I need to sort of get some practical experience before I would be willing to make that leap. So it's important to think of those long-term goals and short-term goals. Use LinkedIn for finding individuals and organizations that fit with your ideal job. I reached out to people, asked them for LinkedIn connections. In some cases, I asked for informational interviews, and I was quite surprised by the number of people who were willing to spend 20 minutes or a half an hour out of their busy days answering my questions. Find out who is doing applied research in your own backyard and connect. In my case, I contacted the director of the Small Business Development Center locally and told him about my idea of having a consulting firm down the road. He actually did some logistical research, had some graduate students at the local university do a market analysis having to do with, would someone with my skill set in qualitative methods, is there a market for consumer insights research within the region? And in fact, yes, we found that to be the case. Next slide, please. So call organizations in your region to find out their methodologies and approach to doing research. I called a whole bunch of market research firms in Des Moines, and I found out that many of them focus on the quantitative aspect. So that enables you to kind of see what your strengths are and setting yourself apart from potential competition. Join organizations to learn the language and network. EPIC, which some of you may know about already, is Ethnographic Praxis and Industry Community. And they have a wealth of resources online, as well as they have an annual conference. And this year it's going to be a virtual conference. So I encourage you to check them out. Educate people on why you would be an ideal fit if the organization's mission is attractive. So situate yourself in terms of advancing their mission. And it's your job to kind of think through. Most people have no idea what anthropology is. You need to break it down for them. And you know, in the business world right now, gaining deep insights, as well as focusing on empathy, listening, your ability to do qualitative research, those are skills that you want to emphasize. And finally, connect with recruiters on LinkedIn. This is actually how I landed my current position. So it's really important to put some effort into your LinkedIn profile so that recruiters can find you. What I was finding was I applied to a number of positions cold and wasn't getting a lot of results. So I'd encourage you to reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much for listening.
We have the next slide, please. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Wirtz.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Wirtz. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a white woman with long blonde hair, and today I'm wearing a blue shirt, and I'm sitting at my kitchen table with a plain white wall behind me. Next slide, please. So I recently started a new job as a qualitative analyst in EMIC, which is the Ethnographic Methods and Implementation Core, the qualitative branch of CADRE, which is the Center for Access and Delivery Research and Evaluation, at the Veterans Affairs in Iowa City. I work with a team of anthropologists and other social scientists employing qualitative methods to research healthcare delivery at the VA, and I work with providers, veterans, and their families to implement meaningful changes to improve health outcomes of the veterans that we serve. Next slide, please. I'd first like to acknowledge VA support for this. This material is the result of work supported with resources and use of facilities at Cadre at Iowa City, Iowa, the VA healthcare system. Next slide, please. So I'd like to highlight through storytelling my networking journey and hope that these lessons can be helpful for you as you build up your own network. So I received my PhD from Purdue University in 2017, where my research focused on maternal health, gender-based violence, and humanitarian aid in a refugee camp in Kenya. You might be wondering how I went from doing research in a refugee camp in Kenya to doing research at the VA in Iowa City. Well, networking is a huge part of that story that I'll be sharing with you today. When I returned from my dissertation fieldwork, I knew I wanted to use anthropological methods to affect real and positive change in the world. I spoke with my graduate advisors about opportunities to apply anthropology. One of my advisors, Ryle Nolan, had been involved with Engineers Without Borders for some time and connected me to members of the Purdue chapter. By joining EWB, I was able to become part of the team and work closely with engineering students and faculty. My work with EWB led to a graduate research position in the Polytechnic Institute at Purdue to design an interdisciplinary course in human-centered design. One of the faculty I worked with, Sherilyn Briller, had connections across campus, including in engineering education. Both my experience with EWB and my connection to Dr. Briller opened the door for a postdoctoral fellowship on a major National Science Foundation-funded project in engineering education. During my postdoc, I had the privilege of working closely with my main advisor, Dr. Elizabeth Briody. And through my interactions with my postdoc and graduate mentors, I was able to showcase my skills and then also share with them my career goals. I expressed to them that I was on the hunt for a job that fit my skill set and fulfilled my desire to apply anthropology to real-life problems. These mentors would frequently send me job opportunities they ran across that they felt fit my goals. One day, a few months ago, Elizabeth sent me an email that was forwarded to her by somebody who was in her network. That somebody happened to be the director of EMIC and my now supervisor, Jane Merkley. Dr. Merkley was looking to hire somebody with a background in medical anthropology to join the EMIC team at the VA. I was immediately excited by the description in the job ad, so I emailed her about my interest in the job. A few months later, and here I am as a new member of the team in an exciting new job. Aside from the various connections in my network that directly led to my current position, I was also able to leverage other network connections that I had made throughout my graduate career that helped me through the job hiring process. I was able to reach out to one of my colleagues at Purdue who previously worked for the VA to gain information on the institution, the types of work anthropologists do within the VA, these sort of informational interviews. Years earlier, as an early grad student, interested in a wide range of post-PhD careers, I thought it was important to join the National Association of Practicing Anthropology to start cultivating a network of anthropologists working outside of higher education and also to explore the multitude of career paths that anthropologists engage in. One of the people I got to know through this organization and through networking is Jason Lind, who's an anthropologist who's worked for the VA for over a decade. When I started applying for this current job, I was able to reach out to him as well for valuable guidance in navigating this hiring process. If you'd asked me just a few years ago what I would think if I knew I'd be building a career in research at the VA, I would not have been able to imagine how I would get to this point. I'm now part of a great team of social scientists doing fascinating and important work. I'm part of a network of over 80 anthropologists and other social scientists working in the VA. And I had no idea there were so many of us and that the VA was such a rich place of opportunity for anthropology careers. My network played an integral role in connecting me to these opportunities and shaping my career path. Next slide, please. So when I think of my approach to networking, I also often think that networking as it's described is often discussed in sort of an abstract way and something that you should just do. And when I started graduate school, I thought of networking as something as sort of utilitarian, something that business people do during stuffy cocktail parties, or that academics do in the hallways of conferences or in specified networking events that's purely for the purpose of getting ahead. I now understand networking to be something that is an essential part of being a professional and something that should be approached both purposely and practiced consistently, so it becomes something you just do and don't necessarily actively think about doing all the time. To me, some of the most important things to remember about networking is, first, that networking is not a discrete task that you engage in at specific points in time for specific purposes. It shouldn't be seen as a purely utilitarian task to directly benefit your career. Instead, secondly, network should be seen as praxis. It's best approached as an integral part of your professional life and should be embedded into your daily activities. Third, expect the unexpected. You never really know where your career will take you, so cast your net wide and search for diverse opportunities. When I developed a connection with Jason Lynn and others at Napa, working for the VA was not something that ever crossed my radar, but that connection was essential to getting me to where I am today. And finally, mobilize your network. Be purposeful about it. Let your contacts know what your goals are and how they can help you reach those goals. Networks themselves are both organic and something that requires deliberate cultivation and management. Be active about forging new connections, maintaining those connections, and leveraging them by reaching out to people and letting them know what your needs are and how they can help you. Building and mobilizing personal relationships is a huge part of what we do as anthropologists. Networking is best approached when it is seen as a long-term commitment to building and cultivating those personal relationships. So thank you for joining us today, and good luck on your own career journey.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And could we have the next slide, please? We have yet another Elizabeth who will be presenting. This is Beth Holland. Beth, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Beth Holland. I'm a middle-aged white woman with eyeglasses and long brown hair. And today I'm wearing a blue shirt with a black sweater, and I have silver earrings on and a silver necklace. And I'm in my office in my house, and the wall behind me is a grouping of black and white framed prints. So I'm glad to be here. I don't have slides, so it's just going to be you seeing me, but I do have some tips in my story for the purpose to keep this conversational and personal, but I'll be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn afterwards if you have any questions. But my story that I'm going to share is how I was not looking for a job and how I landed a research gig with Mars Pet Health as a direct result of my LinkedIn profile. The job was offered to me by one of my connections on LinkedIn, whom I did not know, but I considered him like this rock star of ethnography and of branding himself. And I would occasionally like his content, maybe a few times made a comment on his post. But other than that, my engagement with him was more as like a follower and maybe even a stalker, but definitely not a weak link at the best is how I would describe that relationship. But he reached out to me through LinkedIn and asked if I would be willing to talk to him about a research opportunity. I said, sure. And he flew in from Belgium. We met in Houston and had a job interview over lunch. He had two other candidates to interview while in Houston, both with more experience than myself. And so during this interview, I'm really confused as to why me. So I asked him, why me? And he immediately answered and said, because you and I have so many mutual connections on LinkedIn. Now, I don't know if whether connecting with the same people created a sense of trust with him or if he placed some of their value in mutual connections. But I will share 3 stages I moved through to create my LinkedIn profile and for some reason or another, it was noticed. First, I began building my LinkedIn profile soon after starting the master's program at the University of North Texas. This was a second career, so I had absolutely no experience in anthropology leading up as of 4 years ago. So I'm new into the world of anthropology. My experience in anthropology was limited, but with each research opportunity and course, whether it was through school or through an organization, whether it was volunteer or paid work, I made it all count as experience, because it is experience. But until my experience increased, I focused on what I could, which was growing my network, which was the second stage. And one of the first readings in the UNT coursework was a review of the 2009 career survey of master level anthropologists. And the research found, which many of you might have read this already, that the most frequent way that these anthropologists found employment was through networking with a colleague or a friend. So I built a networking strategy based on this one insight in this one survey. And I did it in two ways. First, as an online student at the University of North Texas, I felt it was really important to connect with people in person as much as possible. And I did that by two ways: going to the UNT for special events and at any time that I could. Secondly, by attending and volunteering at every conference I could afford to go to. And so those two things were really important with the in-persons. Secondly, I tried to connect, and I still do try to connect with anyone and everyone. And let me repeat that: anyone and everyone that has anthropology, ethnography, qualitative research, user experience, consumer insights in their headline on LinkedIn. And on a side note, I think it's really important to have all those labels that you use in your field or your industry in your profile in some manner, because that's how people will find you. But how I approach connecting with others is I am bold. I'm not bashful. I have no shame. And I just really pretend that everybody wants to be my friend. And so I click that connect button. And sometimes it's really scary to do that, because I connect with people from North and South America and international anthropologists. I connect to scholars I've read and kind of put on a pedestal. I connect with Fortune 500 employees, which has really felt kind of intimidating to reach out to. Students, influencers, organizations, conference attendees and speakers. I, just like Anne said, I cast the widest net possible to build a community. And I make it personal when it is authentic, like maybe write a note. But if it's not, I don't push that. Third, my third stage, 2 years ago, I attended the first Business Anthropology Summit in Detroit. And at that summit, I really felt like I found my people in anthropology. And it gave me a passion, and I became an evangelical on LinkedIn, lifting up and giving voice to other people's work and their thoughts about applications of anthropology and business. Now, my purpose wasn't to promote myself for the purpose of getting a job, but I think that it might be an unintended result of having that presence. So recapping the most important steps in my story as maybe a roadmap to getting the most from your profile, these are the three things I would remember, and they all start with B, since I don't have slides. Brag. LinkedIn is the location to highlight all that you've done, and no experience or class is irrelevant. And number two, be bold and generous. Give recommendations to others, lift others up, tag others, and put your original work out there. All these things are bold and generous steps. And finally, build your network now, before you need it or as you need it, but don't limit to just the people that you feel like you've met in person or that you've had a connection with. Reach out to everyone and anyone. So my story has a little bit of serendipityness in it, and in many ways, but it still has a message that I think reiterates the results from the 2009 survey, that networking does work. So thank you for letting me share my story today.
Thank you, Beth. And now could we have the next slide? Okay, great. Our last storyteller is Keith Kellersohn. Keith?
Yeah, unmute helps. I'm Keith Kellersohn. I'm a big guy in the yellow shirt with glasses and dark blonde hair. And I'm in my bedroom with the bookshelf behind me, as well as a television. So next slide, please. Yeah, I currently am a policy analyst for a public school system that is pronounced Wicomico County Board of Education in Salisbury, Maryland. My presentation is going to be about energizing your LinkedIn presence. Next slide, please. So I want to take a step back because there was a question that came up before our webinar today that I want to answer. And the question was in regards to what kind of job opportunities are out there for people with an anthropology background. So using LinkedIn, I did a keyword search on anthropology, and I found that there were 1,766 job postings which have the word anthropology in the job description. I also found that there were 1,032 results with the term qualitative research in the job description. So LinkedIn is a great resource for looking for jobs in your field and the field you want to get into. However, you need to energize your LinkedIn presence and your LinkedIn profile. You need to, and if you don't have a LinkedIn account or LinkedIn profile, I strongly suggest you set one up because this is extremely important, especially in this COVID-19 environment. And this is where everyone goes for professional resources and networking. You're going to want to select a good picture of yourself with a meaningful background graphic. Usually they give you a default blue screen above your picture, and it's boring, to be honest, and you need to have something that represents you. You're going to choose a headline that is catchy, whether it's applied anthropologist or any way you want to say it, people analyst, something to that effect. You're going to want to detail your job histories. Now, I know you're all anthropologists, so you want to think of your profile as thick data with very important keywords in them. Include your skills. There's a whole section on skills in your profile. Qualitative research, quantitative research, list that. If you come from an academic background, list training, teaching, coaching, teamwork, those sort of things. Next slide, please. This is also very important, and this has worked wonders for me in getting attention on my profile. Post articles, post content on LinkedIn that have to do with anthropology or qualitative research or those related to the working business world, such as diversity or human resources or nonprofits or anything really business or anthropology related. People are going to see those articles. When they click like, everyone that they're connected with is going to see that they liked this article, right? So you see how this networking is starting to work. Repost articles other people have already posted. There's nothing wrong with that. All you have to do is share, and if you know about Facebook, you can hit share, and you can share the article right over again. As long as it's relevant to you and your profile and it's something you want your network to know about, post it. Write your own LinkedIn articles. Yes, you can. At first, when someone said, Keith, you should write your own LinkedIn articles, I thought, oh, no, I can't do that. I can't put myself out there like that. My writing skills, I don't know about that. But it's actually, anyone can do it. You don't need an IRB. You don't need to make citations. You just put down your knowledge of what you know. And if you decide to visit my LinkedIn profile, you can look at mine as an example, and you can see that they're not spectacular by any means. Next slide, please. You can increase your visibility on LinkedIn when you post those articles by using hashtags, such as hashtag anthropology, hashtag management, hashtag HR, hashtag diversity. Those things, people follow those particular hashtags on LinkedIn, and they will search for those particular hashtags and search for articles. And when they find those articles, they'll find you. Don't do more than 5 though, because LinkedIn has a policy. If it's too many hashtags, they'll code it as spam, and you don't want that. Posting content about anthropology helps you by creating attention to your profile, but it also helps everyone out there with an anthropology background because you're raising consciousness about anthropology and the skills and talents it can bring to the business world or wherever world you want to work in. You can help yourself by helping others. And I think it was Anne that said, not every organization is really familiar with anthropology and how they could apply it. Sure, when it comes to UX and then maybe when it comes to marketing, a lot of companies have this idea, but when it comes to organizational culture or areas like people analytics or other items, they're not real sure how to do it. Next slide, please. Don't be afraid to connect with total strangers. I think this is a repeated theme that we've had from other speakers. You know, you can send connection requests to people, and all you have to do is send them a friendly note on LinkedIn and say, hey, I thought I'd connect with you because I'm trying to expand my network of people in the whatever field it is you're looking into. So it's very easy. You don't have to, I would say, don't be nervous and don't be intimidated or scared to do that. They're going to probably say yes, and they'll connect with you, and then perhaps you can have a small conversation over LinkedIn back and forth, and then eventually you can get to that informational interview or something else. You can send an in-mail to anyone, even if you're connected to them or not. Depends on your subscription level on how many you can do per month, but really you can email a recruiter or in-mail a VP at a company, which I've done anytime. Now, whether they get back with you or not is another story, but you can do that. It is possible. Next slide, please. Next slide, or is there no more slides? Oh, that's it.
No, go back one slide, please.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Keith.
Oh, okay. Post something at least once per week. So as I was talking about posting content and posting articles and writing articles, what I have found is that posting something once a week is very important. For some reason, Sunday afternoon and evening is best. I think it's people are anticipating the work week. They're anticipating their goals and they're starting to develop ideas. And some people are on there also looking for other opportunities at the same time. And that will carry with you through the week with your likes and connections and everything and so forth. Give yourself a goal. You know, if you give yourself a goal, you'll kind of hold yourself accountable that you're going to make 10 new connections this week, or you're going to do one article, you're going to post one article every week for the next 5 weeks. And watch your connections grow as this happens. And then, you know, like I said before, conduct informational interviews or just message people through in-mail. Contact them and say, hey, I'd really love to talk to you sometime about your work in blank because I'm, you know, really interested in this field. I've done that several times. I've talked to people from Germany and all over the world, really. So I've had very, very good success. And if you're wondering about, you know, how successful is this going to be? How much time is this going to take? Well, I want to just share with everyone that yesterday I had a phone interview with a company that was very interested in my background in anthropology and qualitative research. I'm going to tell you what that company was. That company was Wellmark. Okay, so do not be surprised. Anything can happen. Who would have ever thought that Wellmark would be interested in hiring an anthropologist for their people analytics field? I don't think anyone here could have guessed that. But if you do the work, like I was saying, in your LinkedIn presence, you're going to have excellent results. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Next slide, please. All right, so now we are at the time where we have probably about 5, maybe 6 minutes for the Q&A. And I know that we have many, many questions that have come through. So Jeff, I think is going to be helping us manage the questions. But given that there are so many, we will post answers to the chat questions with the webinar materials. So don't worry, check back, I'd say in about maybe 4 days or so, and we will have all of the questions ready with answers for multiple respondents. So Jeff, how would you like to proceed?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Actually, we're going to have Daniel from AAA proceed with it. Go ahead, Daniel.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm Daniel Ginsberg from the AAA. I use they or he pronouns. I'm a male-presenting white person with glasses and unruly quarantine hair sitting in front of a virtual background that looks like a fantasy library with floor-to-ceiling built-in bookshelves. I've been following the Q&A with a lot of interest, and there are a lot of different questions, but there's a theme that seems to be coming through of people feeling like maybe they're not quite qualified in some way for the jobs that they're seeing posted. So for example, the discussion was sort of framed around the idea of leaving academia, which I would say that even if you're a new PhD graduate, in my estimation, a PhD is essentially an entry-level academic job. But people feel like having a PhD, but just graduating, you may not be recognized as having the years of experience. Or even if you're graduating with a BA or an MA, but seeing a lot of jobs available that ask for a certain number of years of experience that you don't have. I think a lot of the advice that the various presenters shared about networking applies to anyone looking for a job, regardless of their career stage. But I think also people at these early career stages have some specific concerns. And so I just wanted to bring that forward and ask if the panelists could speak to that.
Hi, this is Elizabeth Wirtz speaking. Those are all really good questions. How to read job ads and determine whether or not you're qualified. I would suggest first, if you read a job ad and you're interested in it, but you're worried about those years of experience, or perhaps they have another thing in there like expertise with SPSS, but you're a primarily qualitative person and you haven't necessarily worked with that particular software before, I really suggest finding somebody in that organization. If there's no direct contact, doing a search and finding somebody and asking questions. It's important on a job search to manage your time. It takes a long time to apply for jobs. So you don't, of course, want to spend a whole bunch of time applying for things that are sort of well outside of your wheelhouse. But I was recently looking over this post of people who were sort of highlighting the discrepancies in job ads of what people are requiring. And this was specifically for people who do web-based design. And the job ads were looking for people who had 5 years of experience using a coding program that had only been around for 3 years. So there's clearly some issues that this was sort of highlighting how job ads are written, how it's often written by people in HR who are not the ones who actually do the job hiring. So there might be a disconnect within companies and organizations about what is actually put out on the web for you to see, and then who they're actually looking for. Mm-hmm. So I would really suggest when you run across a job ad that you find yourself interested in and you think you're mostly qualified for, but you're not quite sure about those years of experience, doing networking, reaching out to people who you know have either worked in the industry, reaching out to people who might work in that particular organization, or searching for people that you don't know who's not part of your network who work in that organization, or better yet, the specific person hiring, and really sort of just directly ask, here's the skill set that I bring, here's the experience that I have, and I feel that I'm, qualified for this job, and then of course able to learn and expand myself on the job, but I see that the job description asks for this. So it never hurts to just ask, because often there is a discrepancy between what is officially listed on websites and what people are really looking for in an employee.
Anyone else have a quick response? Keith?
Yeah. So back to my Walmart story, the position that I applied for at Walmart, I don't meet the job description at all. The only thing I met was the title that got my interest, which was Senior Data Analyst, Social Sciences, was the way they titled the job description. But when you read the job description, it reads like it's for a quantitative statistical person, right? Which is not who I am at all. And I reached out to the recruiter, the person who posted the job, and I said, I flat out asked, what is the compensation for this position? Because I'm curious that you're looking for someone with a social science background. So he told me what the compensation was and what would it include. And I said, hey, that sounds great. I'm going to go ahead and apply for it. And I had a second interview, and I'm pretty sure, fingers crossed, I'm going to get the third interview. You really never know in these job descriptions and these job postings what it is they want and what it is they're looking for in somebody, even if they're sketched out very clearly. So if you find a job that you think you would be interested in, I say apply for it, qualifications aside.
Thanks. Daniel, is there one other question we could try to tackle? We really only have 5 minutes left, and we need to keep about 3 of those minutes for some other things.
Yes, let me give you 2 and people can choose which one they want to answer. One question that's come up a couple of times is that people are curious about how to identify recruiters in their area of interest. The other question is about balancing between being clearly branded and positioning yourself as expert while also staying open to a broad range of opportunities and staying alert and available for whatever might come along. So how to manage that dilemma.
Anyone? Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so in LinkedIn, there's a feature where you can actually make yourself available to recruiters, and I would recommend that you do that, especially if you've already done the legwork and done some informational interviews to figure out what sphere you actually want to end up in. So I would, put in the time and effort it takes to kind of try and figure out where you want to land. And you also need to kind of begin to learn the language. If you're going to enter the sphere of business, for example, a lot of people applying for jobs might put together a portfolio. And so instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I've been studying anthropology all these years, I don't have a portfolio. Think about transforming what you have done in the format of your intended audience. And so that's part of the process, to try and think about your skill set in a way that's going to be meaningful for people that you are coming into contact with in your new professional area.
Great, thank you. Could we have the next slide, please? Thanks, Gabby. So just a quick summary of what we've covered today. 5 secrets for networking. Here are the 5 secrets. Number 1, identify members of your personal and professional network that might lead you to jobs. Number 2, use weak ties to bridge into different networks. Keep thinking about weak ties. Number 3, learn what you want during an informational interview, and also learn what the person who represents the organization wants, particularly as you try out your elevator pitch. Number 4, create a presence on LinkedIn and/or other networking sites. And finally, think of networking as praxis, as the field, as a way of life. Next slide. So we have a few things we wanted to let you know will be happening. First, all of you who came to the webinar will be receiving an evaluation through the email that you used to register. Please fill it out. We have 2 more webinars left in this series, and we want to try to make any improvements that we can. Number 2, go on to the AAA website, and you will already see posted all of the materials from webinar 1 that occurred last week. That includes the recording, the slide deck, a list of resources, and answers to the chat Q&As. That material will be ready for this webinar in a few days' time. Probably by early Monday or Tuesday next week, everything will be up. Number 3, we have 2 more webinars in the series. Register for the last 2. They're going to be very good. One is on This Is Not Your Parents' Resume, and the last one, Facing the Interview Squad. Next slide, please. So we'll hope to see you next Thursday, same time, same place, at 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. And thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I just want to add one last thing too. I know you covered it, but we've been receiving a lot of questions. We're going to, as Elizabeth said, we're going to be answering those questions. So go to our website and particularly the webinar page. And in a few days, we'll have that up and running for you. Thanks, everyone.